Joined now by esteemed geologist, Professor Ian Plimer. I mentioned the Greens leader, Adam Bandt. He is urging Americans to reject Donald Trump. He tweeted this. He said a second Donald Trump term would be dangerous for the climate, for already marginalised communities, and for the growing threat of far-right extremism. I hope Americans use their voting power in the upcoming election to stop this from happening. Big respect to Joe Biden for making what would have been a very difficult decision overnight. The new Democrat presidential candidate must do all they can to keep Trump out of office. But it's interesting, Ian, because his American counterpart, you could say, presidential nominee for the American Green Party, Dr. Jill Stein, she seems to think the threat comes from the other side. She tweeted, Joe Biden has been removed from power by the same anti-democratic forces that rigged the field for him in 2020 and skipped the primary to anoint him in 2024. Don't be fooled. The same DNC elites that put him in power will replace him with another tool for Wall Street and the war machine. Professor Plimer, what do you make of Adam Bandt's comments, and what do you think a second Trump term will mean for the planet and for the threat of global warming?
Well, the American voter would say, who the hell is Adam Bandt? You know, we've got our own weirdos. We don't have to do Australian weirdos. And so to call Trump dangerous, we've already had him for one term. You can already see what he's done. And was he dangerous? No. He created more jobs, especially for marginalised people. He closed the border, which actually meant that poor people didn't have competition from illegals for jobs. His energy policies made America great again. So Adam Bandt is showing that he's suffering from a severe dose of Trump derangement syndrome. No one listens to him in the US. No one should listen to him in this country. The US has got enough of their own weirdos.
And for him to be tweeting about far-right extremism when we're seeing what's happened since October 7, right here in in our country, in our cities across Australia, with far-left activists intimidating members of the Jewish community and a lot of people who seem to be of the same political persuasion as the Greens participating in behaviour that is frankly un-Australian and should be condemned. Let's talk about the Teals. Zoe Daniels, I mentioned her earlier. She was on Insiders yesterday, also talking about the perils of a second Trump term.
And I think anyone who thinks Trump has changed as a result of the assassination attempt is living in a parallel universe. We saw him wind back Barack Obama's initiatives on renewable energy. We saw him pull out of Paris.
Now, what will a second term mean for net zero ambitions? That is something that has been embraced in the West, from the UK to the US to here. If Trump walks away from net zero, will we see a domino effect with other nations following?
Well, Trump's already shown his colours on this. He wants to drill to get more gas and oil. He wants to, again, get out of Paris. He wants to make renewables competitive. No one objects to renewables. They just have to be on a level playing field, and that level playing field is without subsidies, because Trump, with his business background, is looking at costs. What are the costs to the average American? What are the costs for the country as a nation? Now, I think if Trump does get out of Paris and does stop subsidies for renewables, the rest of the world will be not competing on energy. It won't be a level playing field. The US will be way in front, and that may well stimulate some change. And I think that change is coming because the costs of electricity have almost gone up tenfold around the world, especially in the Western world, and people are saying, no, that's enough. We once had cheap, reliable electricity. Why should we actually have electricity now that's very expensive? So Zoe Daniel and Adam Bandt, these are job destroyers. You know, why not have an opinion from someone who's not a Teal or someone who's not in the Green Party? Why not go to the bush and just get someone who runs their own business, who might actually be a nice person, might able to demonstrate some judgment, might be looking at costs because they employ people. And I can think of a mate of mine who runs a workshop, has a business in Broken Hill, Randall Jones. Now, go and talk to him. He's a Trump lover. Go and talk to him. Talk to the average person. Don't talk to your Greens. Don't talk to your Teals, because you'll just get Trump derangement syndrome.
You know, you talked about Trump's desire to drill, baby, drill, and you saw America was energy independent in his first term. How important is that as a policy objective in the States for the country to be energy independent?
Well, oil and gas are a renewable resource, so you've got to keep drilling to replace what you use. It's absolutely vital for the US and for Australia not to be dependent upon other countries for their energy, not to be dependent upon the seaways for their energy. And in this country, we don't have enough oil on our land. We should be drilling for more oil. We should be actually not using solar and wind, where we're absolutely dependent upon the Chinese for the solar panels and for the turbines for the wind generation. So I think he's absolutely on the right track, and especially in times where there's a little bit of international tension. You need to be independent. You need to be able to do everything on your own landmass. And that's what Trump wants to do. By doing it on your own landmass, what do? You create jobs.
There is that also. How isolated will Australia be if we continue with our current nuclear ban? Even the states, even without Trump, both the Democrats and Republicans have recently voted to accelerate their nuclear projects. We seem to be an outlier, Ian.
Well, there are hundreds of nuclear power facilities around the world. We are the anomaly. We are becoming the laughingstock because we export huge amounts of uranium and we import devices from China, which make our energy very, very expensive. So we are already isolating ourselves by being the moral anomaly, where we don't like electrons that have come from nuclear decay, a natural process. We don't want that. So what we're doing is isolating ourselves. We're increasing the cost of our energy. That increases the cost of manufacturing. That increases the cost of everything in this country. And it also decreases the number of jobs that we have in this country. So by not being sensible and by not using the thousands of years of uranium, coal and gas which we have in this country, then we are putting ourselves strategically in a very dangerous position. We don't have enough oil, which has come from Australian soil. We need to drill, baby, drill.
Oh, you've got to get that on a T-shirt. Professor Ian Plimer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me.